2020 for the Philadelphia Eagles and for a lot of Philadelphia Eagles fans could really only be described as just a complete disaster. There was the whole, situation between Jalen Hurts and Carson Wentz at the beginning of the year when Jalen Hurts was the second round pick out of Oklahoma, and just some of the draft decisions in general before last season seemed to have a lot of Eagles fans and Eagles players kind of questioning what was going on with the front office and how exactly the front office was putting team first and winning first with this team. But now that we are in 2021 and we are about to start the 2021 season in a couple of weeks, it's really easy to see that the 2020 draft for the Philadelphia Eagles has set them up for a future of success with some of the guys that they took. And really, where they are going towards right now is an upward trajectory. Now, I'm not exactly thinking that this 2021 team is going to win the NFC East. I don't even think that they are going to make the playoffs, but really, I see them being a competitive team, especially within that NFC East, which, is the NFC least. They could be a decent team that threatens a lot of teams' playoff hopes by the end of the year. Before we get too deep into what this year looks like, let's go ahead and talk about last year. Offensively, statistically, this team was really bad at everything besides running the ball. 28th in passing, 30th in turnovers, 26th in points, and 32nd in sacks allowed. That means they allowed the most sacks in the NFL. The only thing that they did well last year was run the ball, which is really weird because everything else was really bad. They couldn't protect Carson Wentz or Jalen Hurts when they were behind the offensive line last year. They couldn't put points on the board. They couldn't, stop turning the ball over. They couldn't throw the ball. And that didn't change when Jalen Hurts stepped into the starting lineup. Carson Wentz was one of the worst quarterbacks in the league last year. But when Jalen Hurts did play for this team last year, he had games where he threw 98 yards in a loss against the Washington football team, 167 yards in a win against the New Orleans Saints. But really, he only did his majority of his damage against teams who had a very bad passing defense. 326 yards against the Dallas Cowboys in a loss where they lost by 20 points, and 305 yards against an Arizona Cardinals team who, again, they lost to 26-33. Now, defensively, the numbers don't get better, but they do have a couple of things where in today's NFL, that's really all you need to look at to be a good team defensively. And it's one of the few key factors on the defensive side of the ball is that separate good teams at this point. They're 15th in passing, 23rd in rushing, 22nd in takeaways, 20th in points, and 3rd in sacks. Those sacks and passing numbers, that's good. If you're in the top half of the league in terms of passing defense, if you're in the top 5 of sacks, you're going to be one of the more threatening defenses in the NFL. It doesn't really matter what your rushing or point total really says about you. At this point, if you can hit the quarterback a lot, and the sack totals don't really necessarily just mean that they are only hitting the quarterback on those sack numbers. There's numbers, QB hits, there's QB pressures, there's just affecting the quarterback throughout the game. The Philadelphia Eagles obviously proved an ability to do that. And even though the turnover numbers weren't there for that defense, they still were a consistent threat to the opposing quarterback any given game. Now let's talk about who's gone from last year, and oh boy, it's a lot of really juicy names that are gone from last year. Doug Peterson, Jim Schwartz, just off rip. This team gets better by letting go both of those guys. I understand that Jim Schwartz is one of the more decorated defensive coordinators that have been, coaching throughout the past 10, 15 years, but that does not mean that he's good. Jim Schwartz, I don't think, has ever been a good defensive coordinator. We've seen him flame out of, I believe, multiple head coaching gigs. So him being out of the building is a good thing for Philadelphia. Doug Peterson being out of the building for Philadelphia is an even better thing. We saw the just complete disaster in that last game of the year against the Washington football team between the Nate Sudfeld, Jalen Hurts situation. That was a big reason why they only threw for 98 yards in that last game last year. But just having Doug Peterson gone is better. Carson Wentz is gone. Deshaun Jackson, Jason Peters, Corey Clement, 4 guys offensively who were staples of this offense for the past couple of years. Deshaun Jackson, I think last year was his first year back with the team, so he wasn't really making a huge impact, so they let him go. Carson Wentz, possibly getting a first-round pick out of him, that's an incredible return on investment. Jason Peters, there was, the problem of whether or not he was going to play guard or tackle last year. I don't know why that was even a question. He's in Chicago now. Corey Clement is in the Giants locker room now. Now the defense, they lost a lot on the defense as well. Vinny Curry, Malik Jackson, Nickel Roby Coleman, and Jalen Mills. I know Jalen Mills got a lot of he got a lot of he got a lot of negative feedback from Philadelphia Eagles fans, and rightfully so. He's the first guy to throw up the incompletion sign whenever a ball is thrown 5 feet over a wide receiver's head and he got beat on a route. He's the first guy to do that. At the same time, he did make plays throughout his tenure as a Philadelphia Eagle. He was a major part for a Super Bowl winning team, and he's going to be missed in Philadelphia. Now, who's new to this team? And again, there's a lot of incredible names that are new to this team. Offensively, a new guy who is very, very new. Guy who obviously ended up getting second in his battle with Trevor Lawrence, even though he said number 2 wasn't an option. Gardner Minshew is new. Joe Flacco, LaRaven Clark, Devontae Smith, Landon Dickerson, and Kenneth Gainwell. Those last 3 names are really important names. Devontae Smith is going to help this offense immediately. Landon Dickerson, once he's actually in the lineup, is going to help this offense immediately. Kenneth Gainwell, I think if he actually ends up getting snaps for this team, I think he's going to have a very positive impact on this offense. Not only is he going to be able to run the ball, I think he's going to be an effective player in the passing game. He comes from Memphis, so a lot of those guys that come out of Memphis are very talented running backs. They're very talented players, and they're going to be very productive once they actually get onto the field. Defensively, they got a lot of good names as well. Ryan Kerrigan, Eric Wilson, Steven Nelson, Anthony Harris, Milton Williams, Zach McPherson. You know, defensively, they did a really good job, not only, and offensively as well. They did a really good job, not only in just free agency, adding some very good veteran players, but throughout the draft, adding some really good young players with, you know, I think those 5 picks that I just talked about, you know, especially on the defensive side with Milton Williams and Zach McPherson, they targeted issues that they had. You know, they had an issue on the interior of the defensive line. They had an issue within the secondary of their defense, and they addressed it as well as they could. So I think throughout this free agency and just the offseason in general, especially when you look at getting rid of Jim Schwartz, Doug Peterson, and some of the other coaches and replacing them with Nick Sirianni, replacing them with Shane Steichen, Jonathan Gannon, I think this team is going to have a really good progression year this year. And the 2 guys that I actually wanted to, you know, highlight talking about this is the 2 guys I just mentioned in Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon. Shane Steichen used to be the offensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Chargers. He's used to working with a young quarterback. I wouldn't say used to, but last year he worked with a very young quarterback in Justin Herbert. He got Justin Herbert ready to play immediately, and we saw what Justin Herbert was able to do without a preseason, without a training camp, without a real offseason regimen that was real in LA, and he blew up the league by the time he actually got on the field. So I think if he's able to at least halfway replicate that with Jalen Hurts, the Philadelphia Eagles are going to take off. Jonathan Gannon, as well, was the cornerbacks coach for the Indianapolis Colts last year. And the Indianapolis Colts were actually a top 7 team, I believe top 7 at least, when it came to intercepting the opposing quarterback. So if he's able to, like I said, with Shane Steichen, if Jonathan Gannon with this defense is able to get them to replace those turnover numbers with a little bit better of numbers, this defense is going to take off to places that, you know, they're used to being. So let's talk about what this year is going to look like for the Philadelphia Eagles. I already said it. I don't think that Indianapolis is going to make the playoffs. I just don't necessarily see it. Their schedule is pretty difficult when you look at some of the places that they have to go and some of the teams that they have to play. Early on, they have 2 of their first 3 games are road games. They go to Atlanta, go to Dallas. Those are 2 teams who have some young blood on their team who are trying to make their names for themselves. They play San Francisco, who is going to try to get the bad taste of last year out of their mouth. Then they play Kansas City, go to Carolina, Tampa Bay, go to Las Vegas, go to Detroit, which, I mean, that should be a win. Play LA, go to Denver, New Orleans. They have a really hard 13-week schedule, and then they get a bye week. I think that part is really going to hurt this team, is they got to go 13 straight weeks of playing really good football to still be in the hunt for a playoff race and still be in the hunt to win the NFC least. And then they have 4 games that could really make or break their season. 2 games against the Washington football team, a game at home against the Giants, and then the game at home against the Cowboys. I just don't see them making the playoffs right now. This team isn't made to make the playoffs right now. I think this team is going to be probably 7-10, maybe 8-9. They're going to be one of those teams, like I said, who is going to be threatening for a playoff spot, and they're going to threaten some teams with their own playoff position. But that's about the best I think this team is going to be looking. And if you're an Eagles fan, I think that's the most that you can really look forward to, is just be threatening to the rest of your division and be threatening to the rest of the league. Because if you make the playoffs, you're not going to beat Tampa Bay. You're not going to beat Dallas if they make the playoffs. You're probably not going to beat the Washington football team. You're not going to beat the Seattle Seahawks. You're not going to beat whoever comes out of the North, probably either the Packers or the Vikings. You're not beating either of them. And I just don't see you beating anybody who's a good team in the playoffs. So I think just take another year, get a good draft pick. You're probably going to get another first-round draft pick if Carson Wentz stays healthy with the Indianapolis Colts, which we're already seeing how that's going. And just keep retooling and rebuilding this team. And in 2 to 3 years, you are going to be a powerhouse in this league. With all that being said, that's going to be the video for me. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you leave a like. If you didn't, make sure you leave a dislike. Any feedback at this point is much appreciated. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.